Hello and welcome. It's me, Marls44, and welcome to another Zelda Talk finally. After having a lot of stuff happen, we're finally back, and today we're going to be talking about what I am looking forward to for the next Zelda game. So recently I ran into a video that Zeltic made with a bunch of Zelda tubers, and I wanted to kind of touch on that, and I figured this was a very appropriate way for me to bring Zelda Talk back. I'd like to do Zelda Talk more often. I have a few ideas in the works. I just have to, record them like so, and that's really all I have to do. So we'll get to those, but first, let's do this. So for me, there's a bunch of different elements that I'm sure a lot of people, from what I've seen from the video, somewhat share as well. And I'm going to kind of go over each one. I might combine a couple of them because some of them relate to each other. Like, I think story and gameplay are a little similar in terms of like the problems with each that I have for Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild that kind of intertwine with changing both somewhat. For me, I know like a lot of others, I would love to see a traditional Zelda game back. The open world was great, it was fun, but I can tell, for me, others, a lot of people, are tired of it, and I'm very tired of it myself. It was a slog to kind of start getting through some of Tears of the Kingdom for that reason. So I would love to see more of it doesn't have to be properly traditional, but the biggest thing would be I want less of an open world and parts of an open world. Something more open-ended, similar to maybe something like Ocarina of Time. Not exactly, but in the sense of the world's a little open to you, but some of the areas are kind of somewhat closed off until you can progress through, get items, get your story going, and get through some of that story. And then some of the areas open up, and you're able to, continue with that. I'd be pretty cool with something like Twilight Princess, where it has like those big chunks of areas that you just kind of unlock as you continue the game. It's about that progression for me, because that progression feels like you're getting the worth out of it. You're progressing through the world, you're evolving, you're growing as you continue your adventure. There's none of that in these two games, because to me, it feels like I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and there's no sense of progression, there's no sense of growth there, and I don't like that. That's one of the things I do personally have a problem with some open world games. Some are fantastic, but some make me feel this way, and I have I have a video I want to talk about with that, so I won't go too much into that. Another thing is gameplay. I do not mind the gameplay of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It's been a lot of fun, kind of experimenting with that open world, open-ended gameplay with all the weapons that break and everything. But I'd kind of really like to push away from those and leave those aside. They were fun, they were great, but I don't want to continue with those. The items were so key to making the Zelda games unique, especially each individual one, with Twilight Princess having, spinner, the ball and chain, Wind Waker having, I don't even remember what it was, but I know you had like a pouch of the leaf, right? The leaf. I knew exactly what it was, but I couldn't remember. And just things like that. I miss that kind of stuff because it made those games more special, and it was also kind of a big reward for clearing a tough challenge, usually. Well, sometimes, depending on the challenge, depends on the dungeon, because some were a little easier than others. Like Twilight Princess had harder mini-boss fights, for example, that kind of rewarded you those items. But something like Wind Waker, I believe early on, for the first dungeon, Dragon Roost, I can't remember what the mini-boss was, but I think it was like a couple moblins. Oh yeah, it was a couple like Bokoblins and then a moblin. It wasn't anything crazy. That's also what makes it feel very good, because you get that sense of progression, you get like that evolving as you play through the game, where enemies are weaker early on and they get stronger as you go. So I'd like to see that kind of gameplay back. As I said, this gameplay has been fun, but I want to see the more conventional gameplay that makes the Zelda gameplay special and different than other series. Another thing I want to touch on is story. I want a linear story. I don't want none of these memories again. Now granted, the Breath of the Wild memories were great. Yeah, sure. But I have huge gripes with Tears of the Kingdom memories. Like, the only couple things I liked were a couple like story beats, and one of them being a big plot twist. But most of the story was kind of whatever. It felt like a bit of a rehash of Ocarina of Times, somewhat. And then also the pacing was just horrible because it was a linear story and you could discover whatever you wanted, and I didn't enjoy that. I specifically looked it up because I refused to play a linear story that way. I was not doing that. No way. It takes that immersion of the game out as well. Like in specific for Tears of the Kingdom, you're separated from that world. At least with Breath of the Wild, it works because you're trying to figure out what happened, what caused all this, what caused you know how the calamity got caused, but you know, what happened in between and what was your past like? Who were these people you connected with? The champions, all this other stuff. But as opposed to Tears of the Kingdom, it didn't work. It disconnects you so hard from the game. It takes that immersion away, and the linear pacing is just awful that way. Echoes of Wisdom did a great job at integrating it with more of an open world style. Beautiful job. You tackle the puzzles you need, and the story beats kind of happen as they go. There's the 2, and there's this big one that's kind of like locking the other story beats behind it. Complete that, and you got the 3, complete that, and then you got like the final story beat, final boss, all that. Good job, great job with that, to blend that with the open world. But again, I'm personally tired of a bit more of an open world. I wouldn't mind something like Echoes of Wisdom again, partially because I just don't want that grand open world. It's a bit suffocating, a bit overwhelming. But something decently sized, I think would be fine. If not, I think box them off, kind of like how we used to have. Another thing, which is my personal biggest thing with any Zelda game, is the dungeons. The dungeons is what makes my favorite Zelda game, or games. The dungeons is the key point for me. Even though gameplay and story are like my biggest things with any game, the dungeons are the key point for me for any Zelda game, because they are just so special, so amazing. It's partially why I love the palaces in Persona 5 Royal, because it feels like a expanded version of dungeons sometimes, and I love that. But in its own way, because it's an RPG game, so it does a great job at kind of blending that together. If everything stays the same, if there's like an open world, all of this, please give us traditional dungeons back at least. Some people I know have mentioned that Tears of the Kingdom feels more traditional, and well, I will say that the Lightning Temple feels a bit more. The others are a far cry from that, and even the Lightning Temple is missing specific things and is a little more simple when it comes to certain elements that takes it away from being like a traditional dungeon. Don't get me wrong, the Lightning Temple is a great blend of both, but I think we need to lean more back into the traditional sense. Even if we want to have a bit of that open-ended kind of bit in dungeons, like look at A Link Between Worlds. And this is a game I praise these dungeons about, because while I'm not crazy on A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds I really liked, and I'm not huge on the actual world itself, but I'm crazy about those dungeons because they did such a good job at integrating an open-ended dungeon while also making it feel like you had that progression. You didn't get a dungeon item because Ravio, but aside from that, you had that open-ended dungeon that still felt like a proper dungeon and made you feel like you were exploring it like a traditional dungeon, even though it was very different. It really did a good job at immersing me into that. And I think if they want to go for a open-ended dungeons still, I think they would have to do it like A Link to the Past style. Change it. Don't do the Ravio thing. Do not do the Ravio thing. But make you get the item at some point. Maybe even at the beginning of the dungeon or something. Like, give you that opportunity to feel that progression, and also give you these special dungeons. And the dungeons are the key thing that the Zelda series is known for. So kind of pulling that away in these games kind of hurt Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom a lot. And it's why, even though I have them in my top 30, they are on the kind of lower echelon of Zelda games for me. Because, unfortunately, they're just not hitting that spot. Because the dungeons and a few other things, as I've been talking about. And like I mentioned before, with the items, we really do need those back in the dungeons as well. You need to get that sense of progression, that sense of growing. And part of what the dungeons did by giving you those key items was you felt like you grew throughout the story, throughout the adventure, throughout the actual dungeon itself. It felt like you were growing and you got immersed into that. And it just missing that takes it away. There's all these simple puzzles in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons. And while I will give Lightning Temple credit for doing a better job at balancing that out and making the later puzzles harder, because it is a little bit linear, because, you know, she can't just follow you up the steps in the Lightning Temple. You have to do the puzzles so the stairs continue to rise and she can keep coming up, and you're able to hit the certain, what are they called, the markers? I don't remember what they're called. I don't really care right now. But the things to activate the terminals, that's what they're called. Whereas the other ones, like the Water Temple and the Fire Temple in Tears of the Kingdom, you could just cheese. I never did that, but they were also kind of they weren't really that great. And the Wind Temple was great to explore, but still kind of the puzzles. It's the puzzles. And I mean, they were better than the Divine Beasts. Yes, absolutely. Ruta is the only one I would make the argument for, and I still have to play the final dungeon as part of the DLC. And I hear that is the best one, so I'm gonna get to that. But not of the both games, of the Divine Beasts themselves. So we'll see where I kind of rank that. But still, it's kind of there's so many underwhelming things because they're small, little, simple, easy puzzles. Because everything is optional, and that's the problem. Everything is optional, so everything's so open-ended and optional. Everything's also kind of dumbed down because there's no progression. There's no key items that you're going to get to be able to get you through these areas, and things can get harder from there. There's nothing kind of stopping that, which is a problem. Which I did think Echoes of Wisdom was going to fix with its, story and everything, and it was. And then the last 3 dungeons felt like just as easy as the first 2, but that's a complaint for another time. We'll get into that with the open world games, but I just needed to rant a little bit, don't mind me. But yes, please bring back traditional dungeons, because that, I think, is the biggest outlier of them all, and what people are kind of, from what I can tell, wanting most. Even in the Zeltic video I watched, I know it's a lot of people were saying, oh, I'm sure a bunch of people have already talked about the dungeons a few times. I heard that a few times. And I'm like, that is the biggest thing. That is the most important thing. People enjoyed these dungeons, but they're not the same. The shrines are so minuscule and simple that you could cheese them too. You could choose not to cheese them, sure, but some of them are very annoying if you don't as well. So it's kind of it's a bit of a mess. I think what they could do is they could make some just a lot harder than others. And if you stumble upon it first and you're not able to complete it, you come back. You just come back. And I think that's what they could do with dungeons. Just make some harder. Just make them harder. Even though you're going to make it open-ended, make them harder. Like a lot harder. Because they're later dungeons that you're supposed to tackle. But you can do them early. And that is your choice. That is your choice, and that's what you decide to tackle. That also gives you the option of putting the items in there as well, because you're going to make them harder. I think that's a good way to kind of have the open-ended dungeons while, still maintaining that sense of progression and having the items in there that make it special. But I think it's better to just lean back toward the at least traditional dungeons. The world itself I think can choose to grow if they combine both traditional Zelda exploration with what they've done with the open-ended games, like, as I said, Echoes of Wisdom did. But I think in terms of the dungeons, they really need to lean back again. At least 90%. That's kind of what I'm hoping. I'm hoping they lean back into dungeons. I know I was talking about that a little bit, but it's a bit to explain because I feel so strongly about this. This is my favorite part, as I said, in Zelda games, is the dungeons themselves. Like, half of the bosses that are in my favorite dungeons, I don't even care about. I care about the dungeons so much that I don't even care that the boss in that dungeon sucks. My favorite dungeon is the Earth Temple in Wind Waker. And I don't like the boss. I don't like the boss. But it doesn't matter. I love that dungeon so much, doesn't matter. And that's kind of the thing, right? That is how crucial a dungeon can be to someone, because that's how special these dungeons are. And as I also mentioned, that's why the Persona Palaces are special to me. So I do want to touch on some little things before I end off. And one of them, the first one we're going to go over, is companions. Someone like Midna, someone like, Ghost Zelda, things like that. The Minish Cap, all of that. Ezlo. Right, that's his name, Ezlo. But those, King of Red Lions, it feels a little more like you're more into the game when you have your companion, because you have someone with you there that doesn't make you feel alone. It doesn't make you feel like you're on this adventure alone and you're just kind of doing what you gotta do. You're now in it for you, and not just yourself, your partner, because they're involved in some way. Your companion is involved in this story in one way or the other. And thinking about it too, early on, you wonder, what is this person's story? What is their story? How is it going to affect my opinion of the game? And how am I going to feel about them afterwards? Like, you might not be asking yourself some of that right away, but I know sometimes I kind of like ask myself that down the line when Midna, for example, is so mean to you, so rude to you. She's the fan favorite of the companions of the Zelda series, and she's my favorite as well of the companions too. Absolutely. But when she's like that, you're like, wow, I don't know how to feel. She's so rude to me. But I also think and I go, why is she like this? What made her this way? Now I want to find out. And that's kind of the thing that is taken away in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. I did that backwards, but whatever. That's just not there. You don't have that sense of wondering about your companion and how they're involved in all this, because they're usually involved so heavily into the story. So that is something I would really like to see as well. I would really like to see the companions come back, because it is so crucial. I think Navi is probably one of the only ones that is like not super crucial to the story, but still it's crucial to Majora's Mask story. Like, it's crucial to an entirely different story because of how Ocarina of Time ends. Like, there's things like that connect and make the games better. Another thing is music. And I do miss the musical instruments that we had. I know the Wind Waker is a little different. Obviously, it's not exactly a musical instrument, but the ocarina, stuff like that, right? The ocarina specifically is what stands out the most to me, but I just miss that kind of stuff, Like, the Wind Waker itself is kind of musical, and I do think about that one as well. But I just miss those musical instruments. The songs that were played, especially in Ocarina of Time, were so special. And I'm like, I'm not super crazy about Ocarina of Time. It's in my top 20 easily, but like, I still love those songs. Those songs are great. The adult ones mainly. I love the adult ones, and I mean, some of the others are really nice too. But every time I play them, I kind of like sit in my chair and like bop to them a bit. And it's hard having that taken away because they were just so special. It's just another integration that made the Zelda series so special. And it feels like with them trying to do this open world free for anyone to play, and so many people played it and it sells so much, it's missing so many of those Zelda beats that make the series special, and they could have kept some of them. And that's honestly the really sad part, is some of them didn't have to leave. So I really hope, if they're going to, for whatever reason, do that, they at least put some of this stuff in there that makes it that kind of special.
Hey guys, Marls from the future here, and I did forget to mention that part of the music, part of the thing with the music is not just the instruments themselves and their songs that I talked about, but also the music in general. The Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom music is nice, and it's more like background music, kind of like ambient-esque music, most of it, but a lot of it sounds very similar, sounds kind of the same, and I don't go off and listen to it in my own time. Whereas other music from older games, I go off and listen to because they just slap so much harder. They just have so much more of a unique, creative sound to them. And that's kind of what's missing from these games as well. So that is something I would also like to see in the next Zelda game, is more just proper music in general. And I did forget something else as well, and that's kind of about like Ganondorf, Hyrule, Link, Zelda, and just everything that connects them and their worlds as a whole. Now, while I say worlds, it's not like it's a different world. It's the same world, but it grows, it changes, the people change, the environments change. All this, the timeline specifically, has this connection between all the games, and while the timeline gets me very excited, it's really cool to see the lores in the games kind of connect things. It makes it feel special in a way, like everything is kind of connected. Not the best, of course, the Zelda timeline's a bit messy, but it gives theories life and other things, and it just makes it so special, and it's the reason that I love the Zelda series so much as a whole together, is just that, alongside the dungeons, because it makes Ganondorf, Link, Zelda, and every like incarnation of Link and Zelda feel so much more special, rather than just some random boy who comes along and defeats the big bad because he's chosen, or some random princess that's just involved in this. And, you know, Ganondorf isn't just some random reoccurring villain. There's a story to it. He continues to change and grow throughout the games. And for me, one of the best examples is Twilight Princess Ganondorf feels cocky, arrogant. He didn't really lose. He kind of just, you know, got executed and then lived and got shoved into the Twilight Realm. And he wants revenge. He's all about revenge. Whereas Wind Waker's Ganondorf is more humbled. He really has to strategize because he's tasted defeat, and I love that. And they're both so unique and interesting in their own way. I might prefer Wind Waker's Ganondorf, but it makes them interesting, and it makes Ocarina of Time's Ganondorf more interesting too, because he's the start of both of those separate Ganondorfs, because it's the same Ganondorf in different timelines. Even though I do kind of want the next game to be more in line with the normal Zelda timeline because of all that, because of all those connections. If they do continue to go down the path of the soft reboot, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom kind of timeline, I hope that they give more depth to Ganondorf, and more depth to like Link as being the chosen hero, and, you know, Zelda being this princess who has this power, like they did with the main series. I hope they all get more to them. It doesn't have to be the exact same. They could change it up a bit, but just give them those pieces that make them feel so much more special, that makes me love it so much. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for as well.
Another thing is, like, the side stories. I would really like for them to kind of integrate them like they did with Majora's Mask, and some of the other games like Ocarina of Time and stuff, where it's a little simple still, kind of like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, but it's meaningful, you know? Because if they don't make everything all optimal, not everything feels like a side quest, because sometimes it does feel that way, and that's partially why I I've done side quests in both games, but I've barely touched them because there's just so much, because it's a grand adventure and it's like a grand scale, and there's so many things and everything is optional, and you're just like, you're overwhelmed a bit, and I don't know if I'll ever complete them, honestly. I don't think I will. I love these games, but I don't think I will. Replaying them is already hard enough for me. Which gets into one of the biggest things for me as well, which is replayability. I need to be able to replay games I enjoy, because it's just not as much fun without that. I love re-experiencing the games, replaying them, doing challenge modes, doing this, doing that. But there's this sense of, it's so hard to pick these games back up because they're so huge and on a grand scale. And I know I keep using that word, but it's such an appropriate word for this. And there's so much there that is optional, because everything is pretty much optional. Because you could just go to the final boss. Everything is optional. That it's overwhelming, and it's hard to replay it. It's hard to... Don't even get me started on like all these different color variants of the enemies, and I know there's a decent amount of enemies, sure, but a lot of them are just like color variants too. And I think part of the problem with that is there's a lot of like similar enemies everywhere. There's a lot of Buckablins, Moblins, Lizafos. And you could find other enemies, but they're rarer, and that's part of the problem. There's no consistency with that, unless you're in the Gerudo Desert, which got special treatment because Gerudo Desert, I guess, but which is great because I like the desert. The desert usually houses some of my favorite dungeons of all time. So most of the time, we don't talk about that camel. We don't talk about the camel, man. Camel doesn't exist. I would just like the side quest to feel more in place by not having it so open-ended as well, which is partially why I would like to be able to enjoy the side quests and not feel overwhelmed. So if they're going to also bring back traditional side quests, they need to, have chunks of areas that open up as you progress. Keep it open world-ish, and just have those chunks of areas. I mean, honestly, I'm not huge on this game, but kind of like Legends of Arceus did, where like the areas were open-ended, the story was linear still, and you could do whatever you wanted to do in those open areas when you got there and you unlocked more of the map. I think that's a decent way to do it. The one that comes to my mind is like Twilight Princess, for example. If Twilight Princess was like that, if you could explore all of Faron any point in time, the second you unlocked it, and easy, right? I think something like that would be beautiful, because you get that open-ended experience while also keeping the linear story, and while being able to have traditional dungeons and all these other elements that I've talked about. And now these side quests don't feel as overwhelming, and some will open up when you open up that area and you're able to do them. And maybe something's locked behind story, and eventually you'll come back to that area and see, oh, this unlocked because certain story event had to happen for, whatever reason. You had to bring somebody to this location, and now their side quest in this location unlocked. So it was tied to a area that wasn't unlocked yet. So I know the Zelda team said they won't be doing traditional Zelda. They're not going to go right back to it. But I hope they do something along these lines, along the lines of what I just stated, where they have the open chunks of areas, like Twilight Princess, for example. Twilight Princess doesn't have that, but if it did, you could explore all of Faron, you could explore all of Eldin, you could explore all of Lanayru area when you unlock them. I said Lanayru, but I think it's like Hylia. I don't know, I can't remember, to be honest, right now. It's my favorite Zelda game. Oh, I'm such a doofus. But that would be awesome, to be able to integrate all of those aspects that make Zelda special, while also keeping that open world, but breaking them off into huge chunks of pieces. So it's not overwhelming when you start, it's not overwhelming as you continue, and you unlock more as you continue, and it's easy to kind of stop and do side quests as you please. You get your special items, all this other stuff, and it brings back that old formula that worked so well, that made the Zelda series so special. Nice voice crack, by the way. I need water. And also, you're keeping that open world, that open-ended world there for the most part, that allows you to bring new fans in and make people interested because they're enjoying that. So it kind of caters to both as well, because like I said, I'm not huge on open-ended, but I'd be totally cool with a game like that because it's specific chunks. The whole world open-ended is just too much usually for me. And that's also, for example, why I like Mario Odyssey, because they have the worlds. They're like, worlds that you visit, and each world has its open-ended world that you can do stuff in. It has side quests, you can go to moons, all this other stuff, but it's also, there's story progression, and you have to beat the boss in that area to advance to new locations, to open those up. And I think that would be a great way to integrate both formulas into the Legend of Zelda series. And that, my friends, is what I'm looking forward to for the next Legend of Zelda. A game like that. A game of perfect balance that everybody, or most people, can enjoy, because some people might not be interested still, but more people can enjoy than not, with having complaints about story, about pacing, about old traditional Zelda that some people just weren't interested in, and blending the two together to make them work so well. Making that new formula, the new formula that is combined with the old and the new, and make it perfect. And that could end up being my new favorite Zelda game, if done right.
Future Marls here, and well, yeah, there was so much to cover, of course. I was gonna miss some things, and I wanted to make sure I get everything. But here we are. I just kind of stated what I hope for the next Zelda game. However, I want to put it out there that if I have to pick one thing, one sole thing about everything I've talked about today, it would be bring the dungeons back. That is my top priority. That is the one that stands far above the rest for me. And that's the one I want to return the most out of all of them.
I talked a lot, I know. I do that, you know that. We've been through this before, but I really wanted to just get my opinion out there, get my thought out there, and what I really, really want to see next in the Legend of Zelda series, because I love this series, as I said. It's my favorite out of anything. It beats One Piece, it beats Persona 5 Royal for me, which is my favorite game of all time. One Piece is my favorite anime of all time, and it beats both of them, because the series itself, the connection between all the games is so special to me. Ganondorf, Link, Zelda, all of that I love it more than anything. We can go Ganondorf, we can do something else, we can go to a different world because they've done that before. Whatever they want to do. I would just like to see the balance between both, because I think integrating that along with having, Ganondorf, Link, and Zelda in there, we will have good growth for Ganondorf as a villain, for like with Wind Waker, with Zelda as a character, like with Wind Waker as well, actually. I had to think of what game, and like Link as well with, well, Wind Waker. They did a great job in Wind Waker with growing those characters. But I will say, Twilight Princess did an excellent job with Link as well, and Skyward Sword did an excellent job with Zelda and Link too. So it's not just Wind Waker, but that is the main standout one for me, because that is the one that has like the best Ganondorf for me. Twilight Princess has the best Link for me. I think in terms of best Zelda, that would be Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild, probably. So Breath of the Wild does get that, at least. You do get that. You do get that. But yeah, I want to see all that and see their characters more, Let me see Link's facial expressions again, too, a bit more, because I was a little rough with those games. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you all enjoyed me discussing what I want in the next Zelda game. But yeah, that'll be all. And I will catch you guys next time. We'll discuss one of the other topics I had in mind. So yeah, see you guys next time.